As Liu Khan said, a house needs to be a place which creates possibilities for interactions. So architecture primarily needs not be something that just forms an enclosure. It needs to be something that can generate dialogue between each other, and that is, I think, what is about this small little project. So this project, 91/4, has been done to curate relationships between a family of 4, a small nuclear family. So if we talk about the site is located on the periphery of a city of Panchkula, and normally the peripheral sectors are more laid around the highway, and this is located on one of them wherein it faces the green belt and then predominantly the highway. So the challenge is when you build, like when we're building somewhere on the periphery to what we build in the center of the city, predominantly has a certain amount of probably like little more security concerns which needs to be addressed, which otherwise in the center of city wouldn't have been a concern. The main owner of the house, the main person of the house is like who's a hotelier who owns quite a few hotels here. So his idea of house was something that it needs to be very simple, minimal, and it doesn't need to have too many requirements because most of his social requirements are fulfilled by his hotels. So if you look at the size of the plot is actually a 500 square plot, and which has certain like 1 meter extra. So normally the plot are 12 meters and 25 meters here, but this is 35 meters and this is 25 meters. Because these are urban plots and these are like row houses, so they have certain kind of spaces that need to be left mandatorily, like it forms a driveway and a tail, which is the zoning of this plot. And the requirements are primarily to build 2 habitable levels and 1 service floor and a terrace. It doesn't had a basement because the total, like the covered area was something around 5,000 to 6,000, which they intended to build. And we also have a restriction in terms of height, because when we are getting this, like now it has increased, but when it was 12 meters, which approximately translates to 39 feet 4 inches to be precise. So in this possibility, when we have a standard structure because that defines a certain height, and this is a possibility wherein it comes down to be like a modern home where it could actually have 10 feet or 3 meters after fall ceiling. But we wanted to tweak this because we were looking at a house which was bigger than its size. So we used height as an illusion or to create something which looks bigger than itself. So for that, to tweak this certain parameter, we try to create a level which is taller from a conventional house, probably like 1.5 times say. So rather than having which would be around 10-11 feet, we have around 15 feet, which creates quite a few nice volume. But the challenge with this is, with the conventional bylaws, we cannot build 3 floors because we would be going above the standard process. So to tweak that, and because to make use of what is permissible, and because we were building less, so we created one floor which is 15 feet, and the other floor we split the service areas in terms of the wardrobes and the and the toilet spaces, and the spaces, the living spaces, which are like bedrooms and the living areas, in a certain way that it creates a terrace and 2 floors in one half of the house, and it creates a service floor with 2 shorter floors and 1 taller floor, which sits perfectly in the bylaw requirement of 12 meters. So it creates a typology wherein in one half of the house it has 2 floors and the other half of the house has 3 floors. So if you look at how the spaces have been planned, predominantly like we have created like a grid. So this is like where there's a rear grid which actually has the kitchen area, because it has a service door here, and there is a helper's kitchen, and then we have a nice huge bedroom which has a view of this part of the backyard which has a lot of greenery, and then we have the space with the dress and the closet space, the toilet here. In the front of the house, it's actually dominated by the formal lounge. It's quite huge for its kind of spaces. And here we create another grid which has a guest room here. And then we have its closets, the washroom, a small powder toilet. We have a lift space, and then we have the main staircase of the house. So courtyard was very important because here we were like, the kitchen was one of the key element, because kitchen was decided as per one of like the vast. So when we have the kitchen here, we wanted it to be like the living spaces to be built around it, because as the family is like a small family, nuclear family, and the woman of the house actively uses kitchen, so we want the time around the kitchen to be more with the family sitting around. So it was very essential to create something which is a buffer, but at the same time which creates something, an interesting element. So we placed the courtyard in the center of the house, because normally for this kind of plots, they're like this, even if you do a courtyard, it's predominantly on one of the either side, because that's how you could get the space around it. But it was a deliberate decision to do it wherein we could manage it. So it creates a certain sense of space. Like when you enter, we have this huge kind of formal area. The formal area overlooks onto the garden. It looks onto the courtyard, which has an installation, and it's an interesting installation.
So this sculpture is about water. It's about life, and water as a symbol of life. Water which is passed from one to the other. So we see here three people, like generations of us, from one to the other, life is passed through, which is symbolized through the water. The water is part of the nature. We are, as a human race, also as a part of the nature, we are very much depending on the water. So there's a common truth that without the water, there's no life. Those three figures are located on a column. That column is representing also, this is kind of a bridge between earth and heaven. So from the top to the bottom, through this column, there are some people who are reaching out the heaven, the middle, and the earth. Those three peoples represent three tenses, like a present, future, and a past. And this water is passed through one to the other and generates the life, gives the movement. Water itself plays important role in the compositions, because those three figures are still, and water is dynamic here. So there's this the way how this composition is more alive through this water flow. So this is what it's about, and I think each of us may, looking at this sculpture, may find own interpretation of this art piece.
And here on the kitchen side, when you go there, we actually have the kitchen and the living area, and then we have a dining area. So dining is also very strategically located, because the formal area has two entrances, one from the foyer side and one from the lobby side, which could be used by the servicemen or from the people of the house to come into the formal area, where they can welcome the guests from one side and they can come from the other side. And here, like we have the main, next to the courtyard, we have the interesting temple inside the house, which actually has a very nice drama of light. And the main door on the back side has a service entrance, and we have utility spaces here, utility and laundry. So it's predominantly, the house evolves around a courtyard, and it creates a very nice, interesting, huge spaces. Like for example, sharing the spaces between dining, living and kitchen creates one singular unified space, which itself makes it's also taller, so it creates that huge volume of endless kind of spaces. And even the formal area is quite big enough to create a couple of seating pockets, and the illusion that creates from the garden in the front and the courtyard, so it looks pretty big than it is, and also the height also helps it to create this space which looks very long. On the first floor, because the program was pretty simple, just to create 2 bedrooms, we just had like one huge bedroom which has like the bed and the living area, like a suite room, and then we have like huge closets and a washroom space. So the entire rear side, which is around approximately 13 meters, is just one bedroom. And on the front side, which is the master bedroom, so it takes up around almost half of the floor plate, wherein we have a sleeping area, and then we have an inclined connection to get to this wardrobe space, half bath area, which overlooks onto a stair courtyard, wherein the stair court, it's an atrium which gets natural light into it, and we have an elevator which is right next to it. And we have a space around the courtyard wherein we have a double light space which overlooks and connects the house below. And we have a lounge space which is more like a space just for gathering, like probably on a birthday party or when friends come over. And so it's probably designed for like 3-4 families. And normally the bedroom on the back side, which is created like a lounge room, also helps to be part of the room, because usually culturally here, like when there are men and they're having a drink or something, so usually like the women spend their own time in another separate space close by, and that's part of the culture of this family as well. So we created certain pockets, which is like a seating space, this is like lounge chairs, and then we have like a space here where it's more like, it's also a lounge with a bed. It's a bedroom, but it's like a lounge bedroom. So it has this certain connectivity which creates a very unified feeling, and also feels like it's connected to it, and has a nice elevation. It has this long balcony with those perforated metal screens which has very subtle, so it has like shades of shadows of tree leaves or something. It was perforated in a certain way. And the elevation also is also like an extension, because we have a terrace here. So the predominant element of an elevation was probably like to create it was like more of an illusion to create something which is, like as we said, it was bigger. So the idea was, because when you look at the urban scape, they actually have houses which are built in probably in like late 90s and all, which had a lot of detailing of that time and how people do it, and we wanted it to be very simple, clean and modern. So we tried to create that illusion of like creating 2 floors of heights of 3 floors, and also the width to be more than what it is. So on the top, it was like you wanted to use half of the area for the services. We have storage spaces, which is pretty huge here, and we have help quarters, and then we have nice stairs which go up to counteract with that the difference of the level, to create a nice welcome to the terrace. And the terrace also has because we could look at the mountains, so there's a deliberate stepped up pergola which actually looks to the mountains, because it looks towards the mountains of the early Shivaliks and the Kasauli mountains. It's a terrace which is like very simple, but at the same time we could declutter it by putting all the services onto one part of it, and to create a clean, nice terrace on the other side. So interior walls, like most of them predominantly are bland, and which we highlighted certain accent elements of certain walls to create a certain kind of mood. For example, in the formal living area, we have a nice wall which has like some kind of brass detailing, and in other bedrooms we actually kept it pretty minimal with fabric claddings. So the most of the element, like the material on the walls, is predominantly the same, the plastered surface. But we just tried to add some few accents which would blend into it. And the doors also play an important role because they are veneered doors, and specifically because in these kind of heights, because we actually have like spaces which could have around 13 feet on the inner side. So it has like, so the outer joinery, which was like aluminum windows, which had to be like pretty strong. We need to be have 12 feet of outer joinery. And inside the doors were also done with metal sections, which created this huge 10 feet doors and pretty wide to keep up to that height. And as per the furniture of the house is like as per the need of the spaces and different areas, and it has the certain color tones in certain areas to blend into the huge volume of spaces. So the furniture is more about some small adding like little comfort accents into the entire spaces, which creates a very contrast to this huge volume of spaces. Sometimes even to scale up those huge volume of spaces, we needed huge kind of installations in form of paintings which are pretty tall, or sometimes huge chandeliers which come up to the ceiling to scale up to those heights and to create that kind of spaciousness which was needed for those kind of spaces. So when we are creating the elevation, we actually had like the house in 2 levels, which is guided by the bylaws. So we wanted to use that to our advantage. So we created this a space wherein it creates like it connects the both elements and creates a nice angular facade. Because it was predominant, like we wanted a blank facade, so it blends the terrace on the first floor, which uses it. So we create this huge element into it, and then it's also like it looks like a skewed elevation, but it's actually made up of a square plan, and that's like an illusion that creates this nice huge element, and which has like one of the element. We use simple materials, like we used stone lamp, like one of a darker element, and this was a natural stone which was used as a lighter element. And on the side it creates this we create this huge cavity, and which has this fins which brings in certain natural light into the interior spaces. And the angular wall and the angular roof is being used even in the inside, because in the main the master bedroom we created this nice little it creates this nice little alcove, and we used a nice chandelier which perfectly fits into that space to create that angular element. And even the angular wall is used as a connection between the vestibule. So it's more like it's not like a space which is trying to be what it is not, but it is more about how it gently connects it and brings in that element, and how it does well even on the inside and outside, because we have a nice garden and it overlooks the garden. And on the side we use this like very slit windows, because we have this huge private area which is from the kitchen, the living room and the dining. So we use the small slits. The smaller slits actually they bring in light, and because they have shears on the inside, it's not like a huge window to look into, but it will bring in light, creates a subtle element. At the same time, we take care of the privacy and the security from the street, because the street is very narrow here, and we didn't want like big huge openings, because it's also about the mental security, the psychological safety. So we brought in those elements. And the angle of the wall also, it's like something that is being used pointing out to the mountains, because it creates that view on the top terrace wherein you have this patio, and it overlooks, it shields off the view of the highway, but it lets you look into the horizon of the mountains. And even it's like a small garden with like a lot of greenery there. And on the top of one of the on the other terrace, here we have all the utilities and the services. So it's sort of brings that element, like even when you're down there you could see the greenery, and when you're on the top, and even like every level the interaction with the elevation is like pretty different. So the terrace here also has like this huge long wall behind it, which has small sitting next to the master bedroom. So it's overall, it's more like it's a very simple elevation started with. It's more like a element which are very less elements into it. So on a conclusive note, the house has been something curated around their lifestyles of the family. It has been an interesting project for us, and we have a lot of takeaways from this project where we could inspire more clients to build this way, building for what we call as a 350-day year a house, which is more focusing on your essentials than on your ancillaries.